Welcome to Reels on the Rocks, the show where your hosts Whiskey and Sweet Tea discuss film from the unpretentious perspective. For Greek Tragedy Month, we tackle Yorgos Lanthimos' The Killing of a Sacred Deer. Don't forget to like, subscribe, hit that notification bell, and as always, please be advised, spoilers are ahead.
Welcome back, everybody.
Hey.
This time to a month of Greek tragedies. Just so you know, there is a little curse that may occur if you do not finish this episode, and there are 4 stages to this curse.
Oh my god.
The first stage is restless leg syndrome. The second is uncontrollable urge to eat popcorn. The third phase is unstoppable flatulence.
Oh my god.
And the fourth and final phase is uncurable, irreversible insanity. The only way for you to avoid this is to finish the episode or take an ice bath before the final phase. And I'm joking. Obviously, this is a reference to this week's episode. We're talking about The Killing of a Sacred Deer, Yorgos Lanthimos' third film, I believe, at least feature film. And I picked this mostly because this is probably the weirdest film we've talked about, and we haven't really touched on, like last week's episode, you know, Wes Anderson is like considered an indie director, but he's been mainstream for like a decade. Like, I mean, you know, even when he makes a movie like Moonrise Kingdom, it gets major release at like, you know, big theaters and stuff. But Yorgos, he, you know, at a place like here in LA, he'll get like limited release and stuff, but he's still kind of unknown. And this film didn't, you know, it didn't make a ton of money. I believe I wrote it. Actually, I couldn't even find a budget for this one, but it only grossed about $7 million worldwide. So not a huge moneymaker or anything like that. But thought it would be different. This is actually my favorite film of his. A lot of people talk about The Lobster, which I don't know. Have you actually seen any of his films, T? I don't think you have.
I've eaten lobster, but no, I haven't. I don't think I've seen any of his films.
Have you heard of Yorgos?
I have not heard of him. I've heard of this film, but I hadn't really heard of him.
And you have not heard of The Lobster?
No. Delicious, but not seen it.
Have you heard of The Favorite?
The Favorite. Isn't that movie with...
It was up for Best Picture a few years ago. It was really good. I recommended this one because it's my favorite, but if I were to recommend for like a film I think you'd enjoy, I think you'd like that one a little bit more. But this one is based on the tragedy of Iphigenia.
Okay.
Anyone who has not heard of it, you probably have. It's like a smaller myth that's part of the Iliad. Essentially, Agamemnon, the king of Mycenae, who was like the, you know, one of the people going after Troy in the Iliad, you know, after Helena ran off with Paris and all that stuff. So at some point in the myth, Agamemnon accidentally kills a deer, which is a sacred animal to the goddess of the hunt, Artemis. And as, like, you know, basically to pay off his debt for killing the deer, Agamemnon must sacrifice his eldest daughter, Ephegenia. And essentially, the short version of the myth is that he, you know, really tries to do anything possible not to sacrifice his daughter, but it doesn't, you know, pan out that way. And right as he has her on the altar, he's about to, you know, stab her in the heart or the neck or whatever you do to sacrifice someone to a god. Artemis turns her into a deer right before the last bit. So she doesn't end up killing his daughter, but she, you know, isn't his daughter anymore. She's a deer. And that's how the myth plays out. Obviously, the film that we're talking about does not play out quite that way. This one is probably more depressing. And obviously, also, there's variations of the myth. If you've heard a different version, equally valid. I'm just going off of the general Wikipedia summation of the myth. And the funny thing is, when I first saw this movie, I did not know it was based on a myth. It was actually after I finished it, I still didn't really understand what the title meant, so I went off and read a bunch of stuff and figured it out.
Yay! I have that over you. I at least did not know the myth. I knew it was based on a myth. I didn't know the myth, but I at least understood the symbolism of the title.
Well, like, I kind of understood the symbolism, but I was like, what is it, like, is it... I needed more. And this is kind of the thing with Yorgos's movies. I need more context sometimes. Uh, I think you'd like The Favorite more, but so you've never heard of The Lobster. The thing to understand about Yorgos Lanthimos is that this is a dark comedy, or at least it's labeled as one. We'll get more into Yorgos's philosophy on filmmaking, but kind of like last week's director, he's not pretentious. He just tells the story the best way he knows how. But kind of the ongoing thing with his movies is he comes up with an absurd situation, and the comedy really just kind of comes from everyone acting deadpan about it, like taking it very seriously. And The Lobster is probably the best example for like explaining that to someone because you haven't seen it. So in that film, the premise is that everyone in the world has to find the love of their life by a specific date. Like
they have to find their lobster.
So once you turn like 30 or something, they never really specify how old you have to be, but you have to find your soulmate. And if you can't, you get turned into an animal. And it is completely serious. Like they even like there's no, oh, that like a lie that they tell people. No, like people turn into animals in the movie and stuff like that. And so the reason the movie's called The Lobster is Colin Farrell, who's also in this film. He's the main character, and you get to choose what animal you're turned into. And they ask him at the beginning, like, what do you want to turn into? And he's like, a lobster. And so that's his choice. But anyway, so that's kind of his deal. Like in this film, the premise, if you haven't seen it, so instead of killing a sacred deer, the main character, played by Colin Farrell, his name is Stephen Murphy, Dr. Stephen Murphy, and he's a heart surgeon. And so before the movie starts, he has actually killed the father accidentally of a boy named Martin. And Martin places a curse on the family, well, on Stephen specifically. And if you didn't catch my little opener, there's 4 phases to the curse. The first is paralyzation. The second is refusal to eat. The third phase is bleeding out of the eyes. And the fourth phase is death. And every member of Stephen's family, his 2 kids and his wife, come down with this mysterious paranormal illness.
When does she become
paralyzed? And the only way
paralyzed?
for him to get rid of this is to kill one of the members of his family. So it's either one of his family members die or all of them die.
Why can't it be him?
It can't, because it'd be easy, I guess. I don't know.
But he never said it couldn't be him. It should a member of his family. That's all he said.
Exactly. And that's the other thing. Again, like, so I mentioned that it's kind of deadpan the way that's played out. And that's why this is a comedy, is because this is an absurd situation. Like, if this were, the fact that it's being taken seriously is kind of where the humor comes from. And it's take it or leave it. Not everyone's going to find this movie or any of Yorgos's movies very funny if that's not really your jam. But the fact
I'm a little disturbed by people who find this film funny.
I don't find it as, like, The Favorite is the film that made me laugh the most, and I feel like that would be the case with you as well, because that one is a little less strange than this. It's probably the least strange out of all of his movies, because that one, the weirdness kind of more comes from the monarch, the queen, or duchess, or whoever that sort of, like, runs the country. She's, like, a very eccentric person, and so her strangeness is sort of what everyone just sort of accepts. But again, like, when you are like the subject in a kingdom or a country or whatever, like, you kind of have to run with what the leader of your country is doing, no matter how ridiculous it is. Mm-hmm. So I feel like that is probably the least jarring out of all his films, because it's at least understandable why people can put up with it. But with this film, that is sort of just the absurdity of, like, this little boy putting a curse on the family, and the way that you don't really understand that that's what's going on until maybe about 40 minutes into the movie, where the son gets sick and they're trying to figure out what's wrong with him. And Martin, who already has kind of a relationship with Stephen, is like, well, you knew this was going to... Like, he says it so quickly you could totally miss it if you're not paying attention, because he just straight out, in one short kind of, like, 1 minute monologue, I don't know, he, like, explains it to Stephen very quickly, and it kind of comes out of nowhere, and it's like, what? And And then it just cuts to him getting escorted out by security because, as ridiculous as what he said was, like, you know, he essentially like threatened the family.
Wait,
So I've been rambling for most of this episode. I'm curious what you thought of the film, because I was sort of thinking you might hate this. I'm not sure. It's a very strange film. Obviously, you don't find it funny, which
I'm very confused by. Because like there were some parts that I had to look up to follow what was going on. We'll get to that in a minute. So, and I'd found everybody was billing this as just horror. I didn't know anybody that billed it like as a dark comedy.
That's what it's billed as on Netflix. Which, if you're listening to this, hopefully it's still up. But that's, again, all of his films are categorized as dark comedy. The most disturbing one is his first film, Dogtooth, which was made in his native Greece. So that one's a foreign film. Like, he mostly does English language now, but that one is a lot worse than this. That one, the absurd situation is because it's like essentially like a family cult. The father has like lied to his kids that they have to like get their dog teeth removed or else they'll turn into monsters or something, and like it's this whole thing, but essentially it's like child abuse, the movie. So that one is a lot more disturbing than his later films, because The Lobster you haven't seen, but it also is pretty, again, the idea is absurd, but I mean, imagine if you don't have a husband by like the time you turn 30, you're gonna get turned into an animal. Like, if that was real, that's actually kind of scary.
I mean, it is, but if you already live in that world, I guess that's normal.
True, but again, maybe we should talk about that movie in the future. But there is sort of a scared desperation of all the characters because they just don't want to turn into an animal. And so, like, in the context of the story, it's not funny, but the idea is that it's just so absurd, like that you're supposed to find it funny. And the parts that I find funny are darkly funny. Like, it's things like when the kids are like crawling around, like when their legs aren't working.
See, I found that sad.
I don't know, man. Like, just the idea, like his
the only time that I laughed.
It's so mean. It's so mean when he's trying to make his son walk and he's just like tossing him around. Like,
that whole scene was very tragic. Like,
it's tragic, but it's partly because he's such a jerk that it's like and that too. Like, also the way the daughter has kind of a romantic relationship with Martin, so she thinks that she's exempt from the curse. And so she's sort of rebelling against her family and being like, oh, he wouldn't do that to me. And then when the curse comes to her, she's begging Martin. And then after that, she starts being kind of like sassy with her brother and mom. Like, oh, I don't know. It's things like that. But like almost kind of the dark side of humanity of like the, when you're put up against a wall, the sort of like evil things you'll do to try and make it out ahead of someone else. Like, and that's dark, but it is also like funny to watch this family dynamic break down a little bit.
That is like the most disturbing thing I think I've ever heard you say. No, I just...
You know the difference between tragedy and comedy, T?
I mean, you will tell
Tragedy
me.
is when it happens to you. Comedy is when it happens to someone else.
Oh my god!
That's not me saying that. That's like I think
I've heard that. I think I've heard that before.
But it is true to some extent. There's the German word Schadenfreude. The pleasure in someone else's pain. Usually people use that for like if it's like revenge or something. But I mean, when someone falls down in a slapstick comedy, it might not be kind for you to laugh at them because they're getting hurt, right? But you do it anyway.
I think it's also about the context, too.
That is true. That is true. This is a harrowing story. I'm not trying to say that it's like...
You're like, I find it hilarious when the people are crawling around, and I'm like, oh my god, that was so tragic.
Now.
The only time that I actually laughed in this movie is when the girl's like, Dad, Bob's dying. That's the only time I laughed. Was just the way that she says that and she rolls out of the room. So this movie...
So you didn't find it funny, but it sounds like you were at least engaged.
Well... and I feel bad because I went into this I'm trying to figure out the nicest way to put this. So this is a movie that I just do that. Well, the ending was super depressing, but then the rest of it, it's like watching somebody run over a puppy. The whole movie, it's just the whole thing. But then even besides that, there was just whole parts where I was just like, I actually, when I was watching this movie, I was gonna watch it in one sitting, and then I got really bored. So then I was like, I'll do it in two sittings, and then I started watching it again, and I was like, I'm bored again. And then I divided it into, okay, I'll do this in like eventually I got to where I was watching essentially 10 minutes at a time, because like that's like literally all the movie I could take at a time. Not necessarily because I was just so just disinterested in what was happening. Because at some point because I know you said to talk about the absurdity of the situation, at some point in the movie, especially when it takes 50 minutes to set up the plot, at some point I'm like, dude, just, you have to just accept it at some point. And it was just frustrating, and it basically, his denial of what was happening just became very uninteresting to me, like after a bit. And then I was just like, okay, so we're just basically to watch these people suffer for the next 40 minutes. And
The part. So this isn't the first. This is the second time I've seen this movie. I haven't seen it since I first saw it. But
go on.
the two things. One, the part near the end where he decides he's going to like torture Martin until it stops. I feel like that's such a good kind of unmasking of his character, because first off, like, if you killed Martin, it wouldn't change anything. Whether he's alive or not, you still have to choose, right? And I guess that's like kind of the desperation of his character or whatever. But the other thing is, like, when I first saw this, I was like on the doctor's side, because Martin's a creep for the whole movie. Like, his the way he is very like unsettling, and like even before you really understand what's happening, he's very like odd and creepy. And the way that he's like trying to get his dad to like fall in love with his mom and stuff like that is very creepy. But eventually, like, as you learn what actually happened to his father, I didn't like Martin, but I didn't like Steven either. You know what I mean? Because there's the reveal that he was drinking while he was performing surgery on his father. And that made me very unsympathetic to him. I felt bad for his family, but it's kind of like, you brought this on yourself, and you had sort of an arrogance about you that you thought that you could perform heart surgery after a few drinks. You know what I mean? So it's like, it's a shame. And I think even Nicole Kidman's character says that to Martin, like, why should we suffer for something my husband did? And that's a very valid question, but that's also like very Greek tragedy about the film, because that's kind of the thing with Greek tragedies, right? You have a god, and the gods in Greek mythology were all jerks, all of them. Like, you know, everyone brings up Zeus, but even Hera, it's like, you know, if Zeus had his way with a mortal woman, Hera would often take revenge on the woman for doing nothing.
Yeah.
You know? So it's like all of them were terrible, and there was sort of this air in Greek tragedy of like, fate's going to happen and you just have to deal with it. And that's kind of the thing with Martin, is it's like, he's not to be reasoned with, and there's no understanding or justifying his weird superpowers. Like, it's just like, you do what he says, or...
Oh, I was waiting for that reveal, that there was going to be, like, his dad was a warlock or something. I was waiting for that. That never happened.
Yeah, that's not gonna, again, like...
But I was but then that left me with the question, well, with why this one case? If this is normal in this world, or at least normal-ish, enough to where that people begin to entertain. Basically, at some point, I'm like, well, why was this case the one that gets the supernatural case?
Well, I don't think it's normal. I think it becomes normal. Like, so one aspect that actually kind of reminded me of a film we both like, The Exorcist, is that a great deal of this movie is them trying to figure out what the illness is.
That I did appreciate that.
So that's like, because that's the thing. It's not like all of his, you know, in The Lobster, the whole society understands the whole rule about being turned into animals. In this world, it doesn't seem like it's normal for strange things like this to happen. Because when Martin tells Steven, oh, I cursed your family or whatever, he gets thrown out of the hospital, and he's like, I'm not talking to you anymore. You're crazy. You know, but as it progresses, more members of the family come down with the illness and stuff. And the doctors are pretty much telling him, like, they're not sick, they're faking, essentially. That's when it's like, okay, I guess Martin is magic or something, but, you know, Martin's not going to explain it, and, so like it's not so much that it's just understood in this universe of the film that like this is something that can happen. I do think that it is treated as strange.
Mm-hmm.
It's more like the deadpan performances,
Oh,
because that's another sort of thing with Yorgos's movies, is that everyone is very like deadpan's the word that's used, but it's almost like robotic the way they talk.
well, I was actually going to
And
bring that up. Because that's something that had an effect on me. But go on.
yeah, so I actually so it's something that is brought up in a lot of his movies, and for my research, I actually went and looked up whatever interviews I could with Yorgos, and Colin Farrell, because he's worked with him on two things, and they also did like a two-person interview for one publication when this film came out. But so Yorgos does not write his films by himself. He has a co-writer, but they just kind of write from their gut, or like from just their they have a they have a style, I guess, but it's not like a ooh I'm fancy, I have a style. It's just the way they tell a story. But when he was going into this, he just was interested in the idea of a young boy being in control of like a powerful person's life and ruining their life. That was like initially the idea he was going with, like something, a story he wanted to explore. And then the other thing he was kind of going for with this film was the ambiguity of justice or blame in the medical profession, because of like, if a doctor accidentally causes a patient to die, like who's to blame? So those were like things he wanted to explore, and I think the myth came later. I think he had the idea for the story first and then probably wrote the myth around that. But as far as like the dialogue or whatever, people have asked him about that. And what he said is that he doesn't set out to have a specific style. It's just the way we think, him and his co-writer / write. The way we do things, we don't really know anything different. That's the way he said it. I like wrote a quote down. And Farrell said that there's not a lot of direction given on his films. They just kind of like the way the scripts are written. There's not, the way he put it was like there's not really any other way to approach the material. So besides just playing it straight. So like, and that's the other thing. He actually was very complimentary of Yorgos for being very like calm, not losing his temper on set. And then the other thing about Yorgos, he says about all of his films, is he does not like genre films. He does not like doing a comedy or a horror or a drama. Like he writes a story, and he doesn't really want it to be pinned to a specific genre.
I mean, I know that's like what he sets out not to, but that's inevitable. What happens is because
he's got his own philosophy on things. Another kind of interesting quote that he has is that he doesn't strive for realism because he doesn't believe in it in cinema. Like no matter like it, he doesn't believe it exists in cinema. Because all of it is a construction. Like even if you're having like a really emotional scene, it's like you're acting.
Mm-hmm.
So he doesn't feel like you need to approach it realistically, I guess. And he doesn't like to overthink the material. He almost kind of wants you to just react to it, I guess. Like he like just yeah, doesn't want to overthink it, which is interesting for the types of movies he makes, because I feel like a lot of indie directors or directors who make kind of like strange films do sort of overthink it. So I thought that was kind of an interesting thing for him to say. But he doesn't think cinema is real to life.
Well, what's interesting is earlier you said this was a weird film. Like to me,
Yes.
to me this didn't come across as weird. This to me seems very much in the vein of like more modern horror films that you've shown me. And I know you said it's dark comedy. To me, it's like I didn't. So because I think you'd shown me like The Witch, Hereditary beforehand, that are all kind of just different. And so like I didn't feel this movie was weird. But circling back to the dialogue. The dialogue, the way it was delivered bugged me, because I know Colin Farrell said there's no other way to do it besides just saying it straight. it to me it almost felt like people were reading, and you think you said robotic, it made felt like people were reading like off of cue cards, like, and when I saw this was an A24 movie, that made sense to me, because this is something that I've had issues with in other movies that they've produced, like Lady Bird, which I know everyone's gonna hate me for this, but everyone fawned over I thought Lady Bird was like really boring, if I remember, they kind of do it the same way. Everybody kind of has these robotic deliveries of their
Well,
dialogue.
that's a bit of a generalization, because you've also liked some A24 movies.
Well,
You liked Eighth
The Lighthouse.
Grade. You liked The Witch. I recently saw Zola. I think you'd like that one a whole lot, and that's based on like a Twitter thread.
I did not realize Eighth Grade. I didn't realize Eighth Grade was like A24.
It's A24.
Because
but that's like a thing we try and avoid here, you know.
Yeah, I know we try to avoid.
Pretension comes from multiple angles. You know, you can think that, like, you know, if a movie isn't like a blockbuster or something, that it's just pretentious crap or something. You know, like, I feel like pretension is an attitude.
Yeah.
You know, and so, like, just checking yourself there, because I know you like A24 movies, and I don't think it's fair to rope them in all as the same thing, because there's a bunch of different directors that work with them, and there's a lot of different genres that they make.
But like the only when I think of A24, I think of movies like Lady Bird, like like this one, The Killing of a Sacred Deer. It's interesting because you just brought up Eighth Grade, and I admit I liked The Lighthouse. The Lighthouse I think is A24, but I liked The Lighthouse. But I will admit I had no idea what was going on half the time, but I enjoyed it. Eighth Grade,
yes.
And I guess that is a sort of an attitude that does need to be checked. The dialogue just reminded me of Lady Bird like a lot, and I know I did not like Lady Bird. And
sometimes
actually,
I wonder...
they came out the same year too, so I wonder if this was kind of like the style of the year or something.
Well, sometimes I wonder, like, the thing is, Yorgos in his interviews, it's not like he struggles with the English language, but sometimes I do wonder if the fact that it's not his native language, if that has something to do with it, because it kind of depends on the actor he's working with, because I like the Lobster was another one where the dialogue is very, very straightforward, for lack of a better word, like, but not all of the actors deliver it robotically. You know, you've got a lot of people trying to find romantic interests on a time limit, mm-hmm. and so there's a lot of passion and there's a lot of stress in that movie. And you've got actors like John C. Reilly who are like getting angry at people and stuff, and so it's not like this. Like, and that's the thing. Like, Martin, I do think, is strange intentionally, because like even Yorgos called him an evil child in the interview. So like he is the bad guy. Like, he's obviously the stand-in for Artemis, the goddess from the myth. But like, again, when he was going into this movie, he thought that it would just be amusing for some like evil little child to have control over like a normally powerful person's life.
Has he not seen The Omen? That's literally The Omen.
Well, technically, the child doesn't directly have control over him. You know what I mean? And it's not like just because some other film does it doesn't mean you can't do it.
No, I know.
I wouldn't call this really a copy of The Omen, because Martin isn't literally the Antichrist.
Well, I mean, he could be if he decides he's
if he decides
he's slighted by somebody super powerful, he could become the Antichrist.
But and that kind of right there is what I mean when I say like there is like a dark comedy to this. Like, you know, I used my own moments in the film that make me laugh, but that right there, that is kind of, to Yorgos, something maybe isn't hysterically funny to him, but he finds amusing, like the idea of like a kid having like, you know, being able to control this like wealthy and powerful person, you know, and that is kind of funny. I didn't really make me laugh in the movie, but just, again, the way that Martin really holds sway over them. And another scene that wasn't particularly dark, but did make me laugh, was when Martin has Steve over for dinner at his house. Mm-hmm. And did you notice who played Martin's mom?
I did not.
It's Alicia Silverstone from Clueless.
That was her. Oh, just so you know, it is pronounced Alicia.
Okay, Alicia Silverstone.
She corrected the entire world like 2 weeks ago. I just wanted to bring that up. Right. But that was Alicia Silverstone. Wow.
That Yeah, and that was a funny scene, at least to me. The bit where she starts sucking on his hand.
That was
I
weird.
don't know. That's like, it's creepy, but it was funny to me.
But
Like, I
like, you know
mean,
what's
imagine
interesting
if,
is a lot. I can tell, but when you start talking about it being a dark comedy, you talk about specific things that are absurd, and there's certain just like stories they tell stuff, and I can see how somebody could find them funny, but with the delivery that they're given, I was just like, that's just more disturbing than anything.
for sure. But that's the thing. Comedy is like subjective, and so that's why I don't think this is going to make everyone laugh or even really be considered a comedy to people. I definitely think people could consider this a psychological thriller. And I think a lot of that does kind of come down to the story. I do think there's some truth in what you said about, like, this is going to get categorized in a genre whether Yorgos wants it to or not.
Right.
And
But
that's
like
the other.
he doesn't set out to make that movie. Well, however,
No,
its categories later is beyond him.
he's just interested in telling like a new story. Like The Lobster is the one that got him the most praise. He won Best Original Screenplay for it with his co-writer. And I mean, it doesn't get more original than that. Again, I explained it. You find a romantic interest or you get turned into an animal.
Yeah,
What a weird idea for a story.
But can't you just be turned into a human again? Because I mean, like, they're animals too.
If you lived in that universe, that would be a smart attempt at like, I don't know, that would be worth a try, right? Like, it's kind of one of those things. Maybe you should have been in the room to be like, hey, maybe you should have a scene where someone tries to do that and
they immediately turn to dust or something.
Yeah, I don't know. But it's like, but there you go. Like, that's kind of more what he's into. It's like, let's come up with an interesting premise. The Favorites, the premise for that is you've got like an eccentric
Is it
ruler. Like, again, I think she's a duchess, but whatever, she could be the queen. And the reason it's called The Favorite is because she has like her favorite right hand woman.
Uh-huh.
And then a peasant comes to work in the castle, the estate, whatever you want to call it, and she starts buddying up to the queen. And so then it becomes sort of this rivalry between her best woman and the new girl. And so that's like the plot of the story. And then the strangeness comes from, again, the queen is like a weird person, so that's like where all the
wasn't
weird
this
stuff
one
comes
of
from.
correct me if I'm wrong, but I think there was recently SNL did a whole skit on lesbian period pieces, and wasn't this one of the ones they parodied? Was The Favorite?
Oh yeah, there's some big lesbian undertones and some overt lesbian stuff in the movie. But it's really good. I think you'd like it more because it's not really as scary. It doesn't have dark, like, I would call it a dark comedy, but it's not as dark as this. You know what I mean? Like, and the comedy kind of also comes from the two women trying to outdo each other.
Yeah.
And again, they're trying to win the favor of like a crazy person.
Yeah.
So it's like the whole thing is absurd. At one point in the movie, there's like a goose race.
Ooh, goose races. I like that.
Right? I think you'd like that movie. But yeah, like, that's the thing. Yorgos, despite the types of movies he makes, he's not like some arrogant, pretentious, like, again, he just is telling a story he wants to tell. He's not so much like, but I do wonder if maybe it has something to do with his, the fact that English is not his mother language, but I think it also has to do with who's performing the material, because I've seen other actors put more emotion into it. I think,
like, to me, everybody sounded like they didn't want to be there. Like, that's how I would rate their delivery. That's just kind of how they sound.
I think Nicole Kidman did a really good job in the latter half of the movie, because she really did seem desperate to save her kids, and also she seemed to be like more interested in trying to kind of win over Martin rather than her husband, who just wanted to beat him up.
Mm-hmm.
So I felt like she actually had a pretty good, and the little boy, that actor, I thought did a pretty good job. He's a little strange at first, but when he's, like the bit where he's cutting his hair off,
that was
like,
so
he's
sad.
emoting in that scene, and you
That
can
was
really
so
tell he's
sad.
like very much desperate not to die.
Which, I mean, moot point anyway, because that still bugs me. It's like the thought never occurred to him I could take my own life. It would be different if he processes it than doesn't. No one thinks, not even Nicole Kidman's character even thinks that. He and I thought that wording was on purpose. A member of your family. That's all he said. And everyone
You know,
assumed it had to be he. I was very confused, and I feel like the ending would have been more cathartic if it had been him.
I wish there were more interviews with Yorgos about this film because it's funny. I have a feeling this might be an episode of ours that doesn't do too well because even though this was critically acclaimed at the time, it did not, get any Oscar nominations like some of his other films. And there are like major outlets or like, like film reporting that are like doing interviews with him online and they don't even have like 100 million views. Like you've got only like, or sorry, 100,000 views. You got like 2,000 views on these interviews I'm watching and they're all like 10 minutes long. And you can tell they were all done at the same like like film festival or venue, and they each had their time and stuff like that. And so some of them asked different questions, but one thing I actually think that would be a question that Yorgos probably did think about, but just no one asked him about in an interview. Because I feel like Stephen Murphy was probably like that was part of his character is that he wouldn't consider taking his own life.
Well, like,
Because again, I was on his side up until I heard about the alcoholism, and then I'm like, oh, and he seems like very, very arrogant. So I could see it being like he doesn't even consider taking his own life. You know what I mean? And that's only something I can infer because the director isn't here talking to us. But I feel like if you had asked him that question, he actually would have thought it out. If that makes sense.
He probably had an actual answer like prepared if somebody had asked him that. But my only like argument is that, but like even like Nicole Kidman didn't say anything, like, and she was all about saving her family.
It's true. It's true.
I mean, like I would totally, I guess, agree with you if she'd been like, well, what about you? And he's like, no, it can't be me or something. I don't know. But so I had a few issues with this movie, and I want to speak on them, hopefully, and not be too judgy, which I'm trying not to be. So one of my big issues with the movie is it took about 50 minutes for the plot to start. And I understand you need setup, but for it to be like almost half the movie, that was a bit much to me. And I don't know. I don't know if that bothered you. That's one of the things that bugged me.
Not really.
Well, because I know, because like when we watched Airport, you said the same complaint. Like nothing really happens for like 45 minutes of the movie.
I mean, with films like this, again, like everything like you feel about a movie is going to be subjective.
Right.
It's not just comedy.
Right.
And sometimes with me, like if a film is strange, that kind of can keep my attention. And again, like it was partly the delivery and other things, but like I was just sort of intrigued with where it was going to go. And even like the title of the film, it makes me think like, what does that mean? You know what I mean? So I'm kind of waiting for the other shoe to drop.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, like I thought it was serviceable, but once the curse element was introduced, that's when I got really into it.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? So I was engaged enough, but once that happened, I was really into it. And just like I said for Airport, it doesn't necessarily mean it's bad. Like, I mean, people who watched Airport at the time and stuff were interested in the little mini stories. Just for me, and me too. Like, it just wasn't all of the characters. There were certain storylines I found interesting enough to keep me going for that movie. So it's kind of the same deal with this, I guess. And that too. Like, I don't imagine this is like some underrated treasure or something. I just want to talk about it because we haven't really talked about a movie like this. So same deal. It's like it's your cup of tea.
I remember when this came out, surprisingly, I wanted to see this movie. I had no idea what it was about, but I was kind of like, I just moved to LA, and I'm like, I want to be that person that sees all the movies every year. And I knew people were talking about this one. I never got around to seeing it. I'm glad I didn't see it because it's... because I would have been like... Which was interesting, because I used to go to this theater, you probably know of it, the Los Feliz 3.
Yeah.
It's over there. So... I had a whole streak there. I would go with a friend of mine, and for it was almost a year. Any movie we saw at that theater, we somehow ended up not liking. I think we finally broke that streak with the Won't You Be My Neighbor, or the Oh no, Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood, I think is what it's called. Oh, whatever the Mr. Rogers documentary was called, not the movie, the documentary. But like there was just a whole period where there was just a bunch of movies that we were just like, and if we had seen this one, I feel like it would have gone the same way. And I think that a lot of the movie is like personal taste, and I think a lot of just is the way that I process things too. I'm a very like empathetic person. I'm not trying to say you're not, but that's one of the reasons why I guess a lot of the deadpan comedy didn't land for me.
It's like I can't even explain why the things that make me laugh,
right?
You know, and I feel like you shouldn't need to justify that. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like,
I'm not trying to make you. I'm just like I guess.
No, I'm just saying like, and we talked about something else like where it's like I'm just not a fan of like morally judging someone by the media they consume.
Yeah.
I just don't think it's. I don't think it's. It helps anything. I don't think it's practical, and
right.
I don't think. You know, we talked a little bit about it with Friday the 13th a few episodes ago. Like, you know, if you watch horror movies, it doesn't mean you're a serial killer. So it's like...
Right. No.
And that's something I've seen kind of become a little bit bigger over time. And, you know, if you don't like something, that's fine. But I'm just not a fan of like, oh, you like this type of story, so that means that you behave the way the characters do or something like that. It's just not... true. But at the same time, you're allowed to not like it. And what were some of the other? So the slow pacing and the fact that
slow pacing,
you know, the story didn't really start until later. But what else was
my big thing was, like I said, the dialogue. It just really the roboticness kind of started grating on me after a while. And I was like, oh my God, somebody feel an emotion. I'm like, this is like a big tragic event. Somebody feel something. And so and then there just became a part in the movie where I just kind of accepted that Colin Farrell was never really going to do anything about it until the last possible second. And so that's why I said that's when I had to start subdividing the movie, because it was just there was only so much of it I could take at a time.
For sure. And I was kind of thinking of that as it went. Like, one thing I did notice watching, because I'd seen this before and I was kind of analyzing it. Like, the first time I watched it, you know, I was just taking it in. Since I knew what happened, I was kind of really trying to dissect it this time watching it. And one thing, like I mentioned that Nicole Kidman's performance got better, but I feel like all of them emote more at the end of the movie. It's like the roboticness kind of breaks down, like by that end scene, right? Like where there's like the weird Russian roulette they're doing.
Yeah.
Like, all of them are sobbing. You know what I mean? Like there's no, it's not like they're acting like robots then. And it's the same kind of thing too when like the daughter's like bargaining with Martin.
Yeah.
Like, oh, run away with me and stuff like that. Like it's almost in this movie, I think the reason the roboticness works for me particularly in this one is that it stops being present by the end of the film. You know what I mean?
I guess,
like,
but
they start emoting more and they start actually showing humanity, and it almost kind of plays into the tragedy element where it's like at the beginning of the movie everything's normal for them and they're just sort of playing out their lives, but like once things are getting real,
right,
like they're starting to kind of break down and show their humanity a little bit more. So, you know, at least for me, that's why it worked in this one. Personally, there's aspects of The Lobster I don't really like, for reasons like with the dialogue, and there's and that's the other, like I mentioned, the favorite. I feel like that one, they emote a little bit more in that movie. But at least for this movie, the reason I felt like it worked was because by the end, everyone is not acting like a robot anymore.
Well, I think you're right about that. I guess for me, it just took too long to get there. Like, it's like literally, like to me, like I think if I remember correctly, I think the major breakdown of the robotic stuff happens like in the last 9 minutes of the movie.
For sure.
But I've already seen 2.5 hours of them not doing that, so I was just like...
Oh, the movie's only 2 hours.
Oh, 2 hours. Okay, it felt a lot longer, at least to me. And I'm trying to talk about this without just sounding like I'm trashing it, because I'm trying not to.
Sure.
But so there was that, and there's some stuff that bugged me that I can't really complain about because he talked about how reality can't really exist or something, and that makes sense. That's a creative decision, and I can respect it. So I'm not really going to speak to those points. There were certain things that they would just, and I don't understand this, and maybe it was just maybe it's just the way he wrote them. I'm very confused about this. He sets the whole couple up to just be an odd couple, and not odd couple in like the Odd Couple sitcom, but they were just strange. Like I remember they're at like a benefit, and like as small talk, he's just like, oh, our daughter started menstruating, and I'm like,
oh yeah,
I'm like,
no,
that's
that,
not...
and also the way that Nicole Kidman's character, who I actually wrote, Anna, the way Anna decides to turn her husband on at the end of the night is by like lying down like strangely on the bed in her underwear.
Oh yeah, yeah,
like,
I remember
that's another scene again. Like that's another scene that kind of made me laugh because it's like, what the hell are you doing?
Because before that she goes, general anesthesia. He says, yeah, general anesthesia. So it's like basically, I guess that's his kink. Is
God.
I can't really like be like y'all are weird because I don't want to kink shame people here, because if it's between two consenting adults, I can't really say anything. But
like as I said, the only way, like not the only way, but the way generally like his movies are kind of considered comedies or things like that, where it's like just the weirdness and the fact that they're playing into it and stuff like that. But
there was something else. Oh, and I think I remember I messaged you when I was about a third of the way through the movie before like the plot really sets in, and I was like, oh, Colin Farrell's really good at playing a pedophile, because I totally thought this was
you said Colin Firth, and it took me a second to be like, he means Farrell. He either forgot his name or missed or something.
I got them mixed up.
But when I realized what you were talking about, that's when because we, for anyone who's new to the show, we don't talk, so I shut you down.
Yeah, you were like,
I don't want to know what you're thinking. I want to like find out. But I did, like, you did at least spoil that, like, at that point in the movie, that's where you thought the plot was going. And I totally know what you mean, because their relationship is strange. But again, it's like that is why I was engaged to the story. Like, you asked why it wasn't boring to me.
Yeah.
It's because when I first saw this, I was like, why are they doing, like, that's not his son, so what's the deal? Like, I guess he wants to be a doctor when he grows up. Oh, he knew his father. It's like, the film starts with, the surgery, and then right after work he meets up with Martin, and it's like, why is he doing this? And you just, like, that was kind of my thing, is I was trying to figure out what was going on, you know what I mean? And that's what kept me engaged. By the time Martin cursed him, then I was fully on board, but it was like, what's going on? So, like, I knew what you meant when you sent that text, because I was like, okay, I do, like, yeah, he's at that stage in the movie where he's like, what the hell's going on with these two?
You know what it reminded me of? It was almost like the director saw that really bad, and very sad that it was made, like a 50s film that was shown in schools to teen boys called Boys Beware. And it was like, it's like what the homosexual will do. And it was like almost like that. They're like, he will give you gifts. He gives him a gift. He will take you out to places you want to go. Takes him to restaurants. And it's just like, is this what's going on?
Everybody, that film, I believe, is on YouTube.
It is.
You can watch it and laugh.
I find
it ridiculous.
I find it hysterical. I actually talked about it at length in one of my rhetoric classes. But I think... And I think that was one of the issues I had, is because then he like brings him over to dinner, and then he goes to his mom's house. I was kind of waiting for the we're going to a motel scene, and that never happened. And so then I was just confused as to then what the relationship was. And then it's almost, now I have a question about this, because he doesn't, like, I guess, curse him unless he was already cursed. I don't know when the cursing happens, but it's almost like he decides only to do this after he stops spending the ton of time with him.
So the point at which happens right before the cursing was the night with his mom, and that's kind of where it seems almost like he wants him to be a surrogate father. That's kind of the vibe I got. Mm-hmm. He wants him to get with his mom, and when he didn't, that's when the curse like fully happened. It happens, like, the explanation happens so quickly that it's like, again, blink and you miss it. So the first time I watched the movie, I got just enough to understand what was going on, but he explains it so quietly and so quickly that it's like, wait, what? And this time I caught a little bit more of it, and it sounded like he was saying you knew this would happen or something. So that made me think that he cursed him after the father died, right. And then this was his way of trying to avoid it, was like buddying up to him. And then, like, it didn't work.
So,
that's what I'm guessing. Like, I think that he knew that the curse, like, he did it in a previous period before the movie, and then it was just like, hey, it's still going to happen, so you should probably start working on that, because your family's going to start getting sick soon. Well, like, that's kind of the vibe I got.
But then there was that, and then there was, but, like, my thing, do they ever exactly give us a timeline of when this father died? Like, was this...
6 months. 6 months. I did not remember that, but when I rewatched it for the show, 6 months ago is what they say.
I'm just trying to think, 6 months is a long time to wait, though. Like, unless it's, like, a really slow-acting curse. Like...
Right? That, or, like, again, maybe the trigger, maybe he hadn't activated the curse until he decided not to date the mom.
Why?
Not only did he decide not to date the mom, but that's when he stopped answering his phone calls. He stopped meeting him at the diner or whatever. It was like after the mom incident happened, he like cut him off.
Yeah.
And I think that was like, he didn't cut him off to the point where he would never talk to him again, but he cut him off to the point where it's like, I can't see you regularly anymore, and I'm not going to date your mom. And that seemed to be kind of the trigger that set it off.
That's weird. Okay. No, I mean, not weird. I'm sorry. That makes sense. But then that line of, you knew this would happen, then that doesn't make sense.
And I'm paraphrasing because, again, he says it happens so fast. Like, if anyone's listening who's seen the movie, you know what I'm talking about. It really is like, if you got up to go to the bathroom while the movie's playing and you come back,
everything
changed. So confused because Martin says it so quickly. Like, the only reason you're able to fully understand it is because he goes into explaining the different phases and stuff. So it's like, oh, okay. But he's so quick on the whole curse. I don't even think he calls it a curse. I don't know. It's ugh.
It's almost like he was describing a biblical plague. It'll come in three folds. First, you will.
Yeah, exactly.
So
well, and Colin Farrell's expression is like perfect because it's like probably what the audience is thinking too. He has like this like what face on. That's like probably how people are reacting in the audience.
Well, and then so there was at some point. So once I like was okay, so this isn't a pedophile situation. Then I was like, okay, is this like he has like a weird obsession with with Colin Farrell for whatever reason? Then I'm like, okay, that's not it. So it took me a while to figure out what was going on. And then once it happened, it was almost like the explanation of the plot was then so quick. Then I was like, oh, okay, that's usually something that's usually spread out over a few minutes. But like you said, it happened so quickly. You're just like, like you said, if someone were to go to the bathroom and the movie come back, it's like the movie completely changed.
But was there is that pretty much like the two things that bothered you, the pacing and the dialogue?
Pacing,
or...
well, it was the dialogue, but there was just, and it kind of reminds me of when I would read Ernest Hemingway. It's like there was just parts of it I was like, dude, edit. We don't need this. And of course, I'm not the creator, so I can't make that call. But there's just there's parts I feel that were superfluous. But they didn't. But when it wasn't even like it was superfluous, like it would add some fun thing to it. It was kind of just there, like this whole, I guess, side relationship that Nicole Kidman didn't have with this other doctor. She's like, oh, I'll give it to you. He's like, the thing you didn't get when I was at your house last with my husband. I was like, I didn't get that at all from that last interaction. I was like, where did that come from? It was kind of just out of nowhere.
For sure. Well, so before, like, so. We've I feel like we brought this up on the show, but like, so one thing I warned you about going into this movie was the opening title sequence.
Oh yeah.
And I was curious, like, was it that bad for you? Because for me, it's funny. I watch a lot of really gruesome movies, but you show me any real footage of something and I can't watch it. And in case you were curious, that really was an open heart surgery.
That's actually fascinating.
right? And I like the first time I saw this, I was like, that can't be like that can't be fake, that can't be CGI, that can't be practical. That was way too real. And
You were right.
within just the first 5 minutes, I was deeply uncomfortable the first time I watched this. This time I was able to brace myself because I knew about it. But also because we have this podcast, I was able to look it up. And so that was a quadruple bypass surgery that Yorgos filmed for the movie. And Colin Farrell, because he's Mr. Method Actor, he actually was present during the surgery to watch.
Oh my God.
So
I thought for a second there, I thought it would be like that was his surgery. And I'm like, oh my God.
No.
Method.
That would be crazy. Dude, if I would have to give it, he'd have to win an Oscar just by default if he learned how to be a heart surgeon for a role in a movie.
No, I thought
where he never performs heart surgery.
Well, I thought you were gonna say that he got the surgery because he's Method.
No, he was present for it because, like, I guess that was him just being like, "Oh, I'm playing a doctor. I don't know. If that were me, I'd be like, no, thanks. I can pretend I'm a doctor just fine." But yeah. So actually, I was curious. Was I right to warn you? Because at least for me, that's like the sort of thing that makes me pretty anxious or
well, first off, I appreciate the warning, and I want you to not something that, however, in this case I didn't need this, and my explanation is simply I was raised watching ER, so
see, ER is fine. It's, you know what,
I'm sorry,
watch.
the good
people love
seasons of ER, not the one.
Well, people love stuff like those shows like My 600-Pound Life and stuff, and I can't because they always show the surgery, and it's like, ugh, like I can't. I really can't. Like, I could never be a doctor because if it came to doing that, I'd choke. I could not deal with...
I mean, like, are you not obsessed with TLC's Dr. Pimple Popper?
Oh, God, no.
No, so that's
another... Ooh, that'll just make me grossed out. That doesn't make me, like...
Well, you know, it's interesting.
I don't turn pale with that stuff, but I do not like watching zits getting popped.
Well, then I definitely for your birthday will not get you one of those zit popping cupcakes where you can squeeze the frosting out of a fake pimple. But
That's a funny idea.
So I think it was a combination of the fact that I watched ER. It wasn't obviously graphic, but there was enough going on where I could understand the surgery and the incisions and the blood. But in this case, I think the way it was lit, the way that it was lit, the way that it was shown was almost like just beautifully created to where the disturbing aspect almost went away. You know what I mean? It was kind of like watching, like, it was almost like watching life itself exist. Like, I almost didn't even process the fact that it was a surgery, if any of that makes sense to you.
No, I know what you mean. Lucky dude, whoever got to be in a movie.
Right? Does he at least get credit? Did you look to like a guy who got open heart surgery for this movie? Like,
I didn't read the credits that closely, but I bet it's in there, and I bet that dude will forever have a really neat story to tell. Like, hey, my quadruple bypass is in a movie. Have you seen The Killing of a Sacred Deer?
As if he lived through it.
Oh, you have? You hate it? Well, that was me at the beginning.
This movie has been very difficult for me to talk about because it's a movie that I actively disliked, and I'm trying to figure out ways to talk about it without just seeming like I'm just trashing it. Because there was just a lot that I was just, I don't know. I was bored for a lot of it. And then like the parts that, like, it picks up at the end and it gets more interesting, then it was just depressing, at least for me. But I was just like, so I was like, oh, it picks up, but then it's depressing. And that whole ending was just, I had to go ahead and look at the parents' guide when I saw what was happening. I'm like, oh God, is this going to be like a family suicide thing? I don't want to see this. And then I saw it. I'm like, okay, he does this weird. Okay. I guess I can handle that.
It is based on a Greek tragedy, and also I feel like the title already kind of spells out that it's not necessarily going to be a happy movie.
Well, that's true.
It's called The Killing of a Sacred Deer. It sounds pretentious, honestly. Like, it's got one of those titles like you'd come up with as like a joke title for an art house movie. So it's, well, again, I understand it's not for everybody, and I honestly was curious if you'd like this, because my gut was telling me you probably wouldn't. because usually you tend to not really like kind of. Well, it's funny. You said at the beginning of this review that you didn't find it weird, but then as we're talking about it, you're like, "Oh, this was strange," and this I didn't like. Yeah, like so.
Well, but you know what's interesting is I found parts of it just I found the behavior of the couple odd. The movie as a whole kind of just like I said, it reminds me a lot of like these the more modern, I guess, more modern made horror films like The Witch, like Hereditary. I find a lot of similarities between that. So because I'd seen those before, I guess this wasn't as shocking to me. There were people that were odd in it. And then I'm like, who would talk like this? But then you kind of already cut me off by saying, well, he's a person that doesn't think, you can't really bring reality into this, which makes sense. That's actually a very valid artistic point. But I can't I can't complain about it. So.
Right. It's one of those things where like because you really want him to explain himself. But again, I kind of urge you to check out some interviews with him because he's good at explaining himself, if that makes any sense. I don't even think I did him justice, and I feel like I've been talking for 70% of this review. But he's very articulate, and he's very good at not coming across like a jerk, not being like, oh, you just don't understand. Like, he's literally just like, well, this is how I go about it. And, like,
he has an explanation for things. Whether or not you accept it is your problem, but he has an explanation.
Like last week's review on Wes Anderson, I was talking about how directors with a style, it's a lot more likable when they don't have an ego about it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's kind of the same deal with Yorgos. Like, he doesn't think that he's like some sort of genius or something. This is the style of movie he makes. And, again, this is probably one of his darker movies, but if you don't like the way that he does it, if you don't like the weird kind of stilted dialogue and stuff, you're probably not going to like his other movies. But at least it's original.
It is original. I will give it that. It's not one that I would want to see again.
And that's fair. The only one I would recommend, I think The Favorite might actually make you laugh. Like, that one is not as dark, and it is it's the least weird out of all of his movies.
Well, and I was going to say this with knowing, because when I went through the calendar and did my picks for movies, I kind of looked at what you had picked and tried to find something that would complement them, which is how this became Greek Tragedy Month. With knowing that there was a Greek tragedy that it was partially inspired by, I half expected that to be end in true Greek tragedy fashion where everybody's dead except him.
Isn't it kind of ironic that the actual tragedy it's based on has a happier ending than the movie?
Right? And then
a couple of articles I read for my research was commenting on that too, like, the film's ending is a lot darker than the myth that it's based on, and it's kind of funny that that's the case.
I'm actually curious though, I'm trying to figure out why he chose Bob as the one to die. Because then I kind of got into a head, so I'm like, okay, well, maybe they'll pick one, but then towards the end they did this whole thing. It was almost like it felt like the family was choosing the daughter. I mean, choosing the son over the daughter. Like, the daughter's talking about her problems or whatever, and then Nicole Kidman comes over and just slaps her. I'm like, I feel like most people would think that it would be the daughter because she sort of betrayed the family. She knew about the curse, like, before it even happened. She was, kind of even mocking her brother, like, oh, can I have your this when you die and stuff like that? Like, I feel like most people would probably expect it to be her, I feel, and maybe that's even why they picked the brother, because that's the other thing too. It's like, maybe he'd pick the wife, or maybe the wife would pick herself or something. Like, and you bring up a valid point about him killing himself, which, again, in my interpretation, I think it's just because Stephen Murphy's character is so selfish that he's not even going to put that as an option. But I don't know. Like, I wish Yorgos was here so we could ask him, because those interviewers didn't ask any interesting questions when I was doing research. They're just like
the same questions.
Who
they were all just like, why do they talk weird?
Who's your inspiration? What all that sort of stuff. But and actually, I was thinking about it. If Yargo had wanted to make him a more honorable person, because obviously it was a conscious choice not to make him more honorable. But I guess if he had been more honorable, which actually no, he goes to great lengths to make him appear as honorable as possible. Like he does well, I mean, okay, no,
I'm going to disagree.
No, but
hard on that.
Well,
he kidnaps a child and beats him, and also he performs surgery while under the influence.
I'm talking about the before part. Before, because it's because like he does it. He turns down the advances from this desperate woman. He's meeting with this child who he acts like a
kind of.
And
so also he was meeting Martin in secret. It wasn't like eventually he invited him to see his family, but that was another thing. It was almost like, hey, I killed your dad. I'm sorry about it. Let me take you to lunch once a week and buy you a fancy watch. It comes off as more as like bribery. And again, this is like after the movie. Like I thought he was being nice at first, but the more you learn about him, the more you're kind of like, oh, he's a piece of shit.
Well, the ending, and because I like happier endings. The ending I would have liked to have seen was if Colin Farrell had taken his own life as like a middle finger to the kid.
Yes.
Because then he'll be like, boom, curse fulfilled.
I think part of and again, he didn't exactly follow the myth, but I do think that probably also, like, I guess Agamemnon doesn't take his own life in the myth. And that's kind of the thing too. It's like, like in the myth, he's got his eldest daughter, Ephegenia.
I don't know the myth.
And for this, it's like she could be Bob or Kim.
Yeah, and the more I'm thinking about it, I'm thinking about some of the things I thought were kind of just that I originally just pegged as disturbing, but when I'm trying to put now on it is this dark comedy feel to it. I can kind of see more of it. Like, I still don't think I would have found it funny, but I can at least see where he was going. Like when Nicole Kidman's like, "I'll put on that black dress you like." Like really?
Oh God, yeah, that too. Especially like in the context of what they're about to do. It's like, really, man? Like you're gonna? I don't know.
Well, and also, he put I paused it when he put the pillowcases on their faces. I was like, okay, let me see what's gonna happen, because that's like literally every disturbing case I see on Cold Case Files. They always like put a pillowcase over someone's face and beat them mercilessly, and I was like, I don't know if I want to see that. So I did cheat a little bit there, but I feel like I kind of had to.
I mean, that was like a 2-minute scene.
Well, so I know
you understood what he was doing.
I knew what I was doing, but I'm just like, I wanted to read ahead. I'm like, is this kills everybody and burns down the house? Because I'm like, I've already read about the Cheshire murders. I don't need to see it reenacted on screen.
Gotcha. Well, this is it's going to be a recommendation from me, but if you do not like off-kilter kind of strange movies, then I really can't recommend it to you. But if you're looking for something refreshing, or if the types of movies the T was talking about, these kind of A24, like brooding horror thriller movies really interest you, then I do think you'd like this one. Or if you are a Yorgos Lanthimos fan and somehow haven't seen this one yet, I can definitely say you'll like it. But this is, I'm always talking about I like horror movies, but I kind of like weird artsy stuff too, and so this is right up my alley. But again, I don't expect it to be everyone's cup of tea. Quite frankly, I'm curious to see how many people are going to listen to this episode of the podcast. But I take it you probably do not recommend it.
So I'm going to say I do not recommend. One, because there's just a couple stylistic things that he did that to me just come across as unwatchable. Like, for example, the dialogue. I know that's a subjective thing, but because I can only recommend based on how I feel about things, that alone was enough of the thing not to it. It was really slow to me. The plot took a long time to kick off. And then if you do decide to watch it, even though it is technically a dark comedy, this is like, I just want to caution people, it's a lot darker than like I, Tonya or something. So just be aware of that if you do decide to watch it. Other than that, it is an interesting, it is a very interesting, like more of an art house thing. I still classify it as horror. But like for the reasons I talked about in here, and just like things that I in it. And I will say that I just personally don't like to see in a movie happen in this movie. And so that's one of the reasons why, again, I'm also going to say that's also going to be a pass from me. And I hope I explained that well. Well, I'm trying to explain it in like an open-minded way.
I'm kidding. Well, guys, did you survive, or are you cursed? Are you going to have to take an ice bath before you hit Phase 4? Let us know in the comments, or let us know what weird art house movie we should review next and subject Sweet Tea to sit through. Oh, God.
Well, we already know the next one's going to be the first, I think it's the first Halloween, I think, because that's the first next horror film that comes up on the list, right?
Well, not exactly, because you'll see.
Well, we'll see what happens.
You don't have your calendar. I remember what my pick is for Halloween, but I don't think it'll disturb you too much.
Oh, wait, yeah, I think I know what it is. I think I know what it is now.
But anywho, thank you for tuning in, guys. Hope you had fun. For any of you who are interested in seeing this film, it is currently on Netflix as of recording, so hopefully within a few months of this coming out, maybe you can check it out. But otherwise, feel free to like and subscribe if you're watching on YouTube. Leave us a comment. If you're watching elsewhere, feel free to check out our numerous other episodes. And thank you for tuning in. We really enjoy hanging out with you guys.
And don't accidentally kill a deer. Trust me, it's not worth it.
Artemis is a bitch.
Bye, y'all.
Stay thirsty.
Reels on the Rocks is a production of La Prince Laboratories. It is edited and produced by Alejandro Castillo and features original artwork by Asa Esparza and original music by Pat Mars. Follow us on Twitter at Reels on the Rocks and tweet at us with any movies or topics you'd like us to discuss in the future.